You have good afternoon. See, I was just saying I have ambitions to see all that I want to show you from Monet's really short career today, but I'm not so sure that I will get there. I am at the beginning, not only starting again with something by Courbet, this the artist's studio, or his other title for it is the artist's studio, a real allegory. Now, that's a real head scratcher, right? How something can be real and also be an allegory. Because I want to talk a little bit more about realism and its emergence on the scene in the middle of the 19th century. And one of the key personalities in thinking about, rather than representing it, for both writers and painters primarily, this gentleman over here, who's Baudelaire, a man of a fairly short life, but of extraordinary significance. He's a poet and an art critic. And several essays he wrote in conjunction with several of the salon exhibitions put forth ideas. He must be crystallizing or putting into words ideas that were being discussed among the primarily young artists, but he presented them in a form that lives on for us. So this I have here. So Courbet is acknowledging his debt to Baudelaire. This is Baudelaire over here, because Courbet here shows all of humanity that preceded him. And then these are his friends who support him, including the one who paid for that pavilion of realism, that separate exhibition hall in 1855, which then becomes a model for other artists, what they could do if they can get together the money. So here's Baudelaire, a not very long life, nor will Monet have a long life. And the title of two of his essays that were thought-provoking and are frequently quoted. So you see the commonality in this is modern. No more looking to the heroic past, to the great figures of classical mythology or Christian history or French history, but the modern world. And in fact, Baudelaire is credited with being the person to invent the word modernity, just even to give it shape by giving it a word so that there's some context for it when we use it. So what is he referring to in his heroism of modern life? That was it came from a review he wrote for the Salon of 1846. What he was addressing was I don't know if you'd say it's a quandary, but an issue posed by a rejection of Bourgeois' other people's concept of the truth, the beautiful, the ideal, that toward which you aspire, which tends always to be in the past. That's where you go for your models. So where do you go for models if you reject all of that? Where is there something heroic, noble, worthy of being emulated in modern life? So what gives modern life some sort of moral worth or reason to be represented in art? So Baudelaire is saying, okay, well then, where is the beauty in modern life? I mean, it's in humanity's intrinsic beauty, and it's what is beautiful in our current situation. So these are just a couple short quotes, one or two from the heroism of modern life and then from the painter of modern life. So in the heroism of modern life, first of all, he says, we may assert that since all centuries and all peoples have their own form of beauty, so inevitably we have our own. And he talks about the man in his black suit, that sober black suit in itself, that is a beautiful figure, as much as the heroic Greek classical nudes. So it's just a different valuation. So, and then in the painter of modern life, again, writing about in conjunction with the salon, he introduces a concept that's very influential, especially either on Monet or that Monet is perhaps influencing Baudelaire in doing that. It says it's the concept of well, in English, we'd say the dandy, the flaneur, someone who is a detached observer of life, of modern life. And what about modern life? Urban life. So this is not Courbet's milieu, this. Baudelaire, like Monet, lived in Paris. But what's this new city that has just mushroomed in the last quarter of a century and been completely rebuilt under Haussmann? It's the fleeting, the transitory, the accidental. And that's taken sort of from like, you walk down the street, you see people passing by you, you see people next to one another and in conjunction, not that they are friends, but they simply physically, as you observe them, go by one another and they make perhaps an interesting combination or interesting contrast with one another. And you need to find some kind of a way to represent that aspect of life, which is quite hard to do in painting, which is static. And just by representing a person running, that doesn't give the sense of something fleeting. There has to be a new technique. There has to be a new sense of composition, not that careful, particularly rationalized geometric designs, which had always been valorized on. That's what the man does, that using the mind. That's why drawing is more important than color, because you have to think about what you're doing. So the masculine heroic, no, he said it should be no value judgment on it, just what passes the eye, just what you see. And about the dandy, he says, these men who are the new urban elite, these men who would, now this is definitely predicated on us being men who are not working for a living. They're not workers. These are sometime the middle class in their hours after work, or the men of some substantial means, or the artists. They're all representatives of what is finest in human pride, of that compelling need, alas, only too rare today, to combat and destroy triviality. And these are men who are simply detached observers. They're not making value judgments. They're not looking for the truth, the beautiful. They are simply looking at what is. So that's the new challenge. And that's Courbet's other portrait of Baudelaire. And here's one by Monet. It's only about the size, well, 2.5 by 4 inches. It's a little etching based on a photograph that Nadar, that very liberal-leaning, innovative portrait photographer of the mid-century, had done of Baudelaire. And Baudelaire and Monet, especially in the 60s, are very good friends. There's a lot of correspondence between them. And we move into Manet. Now you see, he lived only half a century. And when we have the sort of verity of a photograph, I don't know if this has been taken by Nadar, quite likely. And just to review the barest outline of his life, and especially of his youth. He was well-born, well-connected. In fact, that's going to affect his art in that he never had to sell. He wanted to sell, certainly, but he was not dependent on that for income. Well-bred, well-connected, I do mean that. His mother was connected. Her father was a diplomat. I think she was the godchild of a Swedish prince. Anyway, her background comes from the highest level of diplomacy. And his father was a judge, an imperial judge for Napoleon III. He had two younger brothers. He was okay as a child in school, nothing extraordinary. And his parents had a career planned for him, that he should go into the merchant marine, which would be another field, but there again, that was often where men of great social standing went. Well, he failed the entrance exam to the school for that. So his parents sent him for a year to work on a ship, and the ship he was on went to South America. So he came back, he'd had a year at sea, he took the merchant marine exam again, failed it again. So his parents agreed that he could become an artist. He did not go to the École des Beaux-Arts, but he studied with this Thomas Couture, whose painting we've seen repeatedly, and you will see yet again, a man who'd been a great prize winner in the Salon. He was himself very academic in what he turned out, but he was much more liberal with his students, letting them essentially try what they wanted to do rather than imprinting on them what he did. And not only did Monet then learn from Couture, he worked in his studio for 4 years, and he also went to another studio that was sort of all kinds of artists went to, this Academy Suisse, where you didn't pay much and you had live models. You didn't get taught, but you had the opportunity to, especially nude models, you could really study human anatomy and you could practice poses, and you got to meet other artists. The other thing you do would go to the Louvre and copy works of art and learn there. And that's where he met Degas. Now, this is an etching by Degas of Monet in the mid-1860s. During the 1860s, these two men, they were only 2 years apart in age, and Degas also was from an affluent background, not quite, it was a little more unusual than Monet's, but they had a kind of a social commonality and they got along quite well. Then later on, it goes back and forth. But here, this is one as if Monet has come to visit Degas in his studio. And this one I just tremendously enjoy. This is by Degas, and it's of Monet listening to his wife play the piano. I have an ulterior motive in starting with two of Degas' representation of Monet, and that is that in late summer, the Met is going, and I think for just a couple of months, the Met is going to have an exhibition of Monet and Degas. So that's something to look forward to. tell you about the actors you see here, or only Madame Monet, you see only a little bit of. Degas' father had hired for his two younger sons primarily a piano teacher named Suzanne, a Dutch piano teacher. She was just in her early 20s, and she came down and lived with the family. At some point, she had a child named Leon. Then in 1863, Monet's father died, and soon afterwards, he and Suzanne married. Now, it was not a scandal, but it was something that was simply never resolved, whether Leon is actually the child of Suzanne and Edouard, or if some think possibly the boy was a younger relative of hers, or maybe of a liaison between Suzanne and Monet's father. But anyway, Monet always treated the boy as his son. So his wife, this Suzanne, she was evidently an extremely accomplished pianist. She almost introduced into Parisian society Schumann's music. You know, the French are not so interested in German music very often. So she was, everybody just admired her talent very much. Well, so Degas did this painting of Monet. You could see listening in just rapt intensity to Suzanne playing. Well, what's happened to the rest of Suzanne? That's a story that no one knows, because he gave the painting, it's a small painting, he gave it to Monet, and Monet cut off that section. I don't know if it would have been exactly that width or if there'd be more going on, but the rest of it cut off Suzanne's face and the rest of her figure and the piano she was playing it. So Degas, in fury, took it back, but saying that he would repaint it, but he didn't. And he kept it on the wall in his studio always. So there's some unknown story there, plus the very clear narrative of the connection between these two people that you see in the painting there. Abrupt change to an early photograph of a cafe in Paris. So I want to say a little more about, before even looking at Monet's painting, what his position was in the art world, if it is not that he has to sell. One was, whenever he submitted something to the salon, if it got into the salon, it pretty generally caused a lot of commentary. So he was like a whipping boy, or he was a great model for young artists. He was almost, I would say, notorious as much as famous from the works he put in a salon. So he was always there as a force to be acknowledged. But the other thing is that, like what was the custom, the artists at the end of the day would go to a cafe. You know, they'd had their hours in the studio. And this is one of the cafes that Monet would attend. And around them, the artists would cluster and they would have their conversations. There was before this a cafe. Well, let me show you something by. This is actually Monet's own drawing of the previous cafe where all the men, now women would not be allowed in the cafe, so women artists didn't have access to this. Where there'd be both, well, all writers, musicians, and painters, few sculptors who would come and they would discuss such things as the ideas of Baudelaire, or what are you working on now, or how are you handling this, or this is what art should be, because they are no longer taking for granted that what the salon said is the way it should be. Just as with Bouguereau's work, I don't think there's any stylistic progression you can see in his art. There was a static right way in which he worked. But these men are now, as we think of as modern, they are experimental, trying something new. It's very important to be always working toward some distant future horizon rather than looking to the past. So here, Manet shows a group of, I don't know if they're, it's probably likely someone can still identify them, but I didn't read who they were. Well, in these gatherings, Manet was just a natural star. Now, the thing about Manet is that he, unlike Courbet, who was always happy to beat anybody over the head with his ideas about how things should be done, Manet would never articulate in a way for anyone to write down, this is Manet's idea about doing this and how you do this. I have the sense he was more like a sort of like a Socratic teacher, that he sort of questioned, encouraged conversation, sparked ideas, and had the kind of magnetic personality that the other artists gathered around. So they would gather first at this cafe, and then a few years later, into the 70s, they would come to this Nouvelle Athènes. Other very clear evidence of Manet's importance to young artists is this is by a younger artist who's will become an impressionist, and we'll look at some work by him. This really tall fellow here, he dies in the Franco-Prussian War, but this is his studio, a man named Basile, Bazille, and he was well-to-do. Well, in any artist group, that was a very good thing to have, a few people with money, because the more indigent among them would either need loans or outright gifts of money, or perhaps the wealthy could introduce their wealthy friends as patrons, or they could buy works. A very important role. So this is Basile's studio, which he lent to other artists. But here working is, this, for example, is Renoir. This is a writer. I'm not sure I remember which one right now. Here's Monet. Here's Manet with his ruddy hair, not a particularly tall fellow. Basile, and then a friend of his who was a musician. And so this is the studio that Basile shared. And for the figure of Basile, he asked Manet to paint him. And you see, Manet is clearly here expounding on whatever the painting is. Or by another friend, a younger friend of Manet named Fantin Latour, Fantin-Latour, a great friend of the Impressionists, but he never chose to work in their style. This shows, this is from about 1870, Manet painting. And here's Renoir, here's Monet, here's Basile. This is a critic named Astruc, and Zola, I think this is here. This is a visitor from Germany. So this also acknowledges his great importance to them. So there's Couture and that Romance of Decadence. So that was his teacher. There's nothing heroic in modern life about that. It alludes to a modern situation about the need for Northerners to be strong against Italians, but doesn't present it straight out. And this is Fantin Latour's portrait of Manet, and his truly dressed as that flaneur, as the dandy, the dispassionate observer of life in the city. And now we look at Manet's work. So Manet is going, this just sort of characterizing, especially the art of the 60s. Manet always observes, respects, and often models himself on the grand tradition of the art of the past. So he does not reject of the past, but he wants to bring it into the modern era. In the style in which he works, the way he represents painting, as if he's working in a fleeting, transitory way on something he has just seen that was fleeting and transitory. So he wants that permanence and authority of the past with all the contingency and the ordinariness of contemporary life. Two things somewhat hard to comfortably put together. And this was an early example of his trying to do this. This is a painting from 1859 that he submitted to the Salon, and the Salon promptly rejected it. So that's going to be kind of same old story. It's just called The Glass of Absinthe. Now, supposedly the jury rejected it because of the moral implications, because absinthe at this time, is this green liquid over here, was considered as something that was just killing off the working class and destroying the working class, that it was one of social's great evils. I mean, it'd be like fentanyl. And here, Manet is introducing that bane of society right into a salon setting. More than that, the man would be recognizable to many people because he was a rag picker. So I mean, he's a bum. But his places where he sort of hung out are right around the Louvre. And he promised to then, Manet got him to sit there. So you have a figure, you have a contemporary social ill, and a figure who's the lowest class of contemporary life in Paris. And then it's presented as if this were a painting, say, by Velasquez, with a dark background, in the minimal shadows, lots of blacks. Oh, Manet loves blacks. So he's bringing in the great art of the 17th century done for the kings of Spain. It's a painting that Manet later on cut up and reworked, and so I'm not sure of all of it, and it's not all that visible, but I read that it looks really awkward. Those legs just sort of would, fortunately, disappear behind the cloak because it's hard to think how they would ever attach to a torso up here. So this is one by, he doesn't see it for years yet, by Velasquez, because he doesn't, Manet doesn't himself get to Spain until 1865. He'd been to Austria, he'd been to Germany, he'd been to Italy, he'd seen Spanish painting, he'd seen the Spanish painting in the Louvre, but Spain itself, no. But you see that dark background, minimal shadow, all the focus on the figure. And then in 1861, he submitted this to the Salon, and it got in, and it got an honorable mention. It's just called The Spanish Singer, and it's in the Met. The Met has a wonderful collection of the very earliest works by Manet, just marvelous. Also some fine ones in Boston and in Washington. I go through there to see his early work. So this one is 58 by 45. These are on the scale of aristocratic portraits, but it's obviously a non-aristocratic figure. It's made to look as if it were a Spanish singer, and there were troops of Spanish singers and dancers popular in Paris at this time. But this is probably just a model who's posed. The veracity of it would be something could be questioned by people who knew much about Spain, because they said, oh, these parts of the costume are the natural costume of people from different areas in Spain. There's a great deal of artificiality in this, and more than what's artificial. This is a left-handed player playing with a right-handed guitar. So it doesn't make any sense. Monet is just very clearly showing you, this is someone I have in my studio who's posed for me, and I have these, in my costume chest, I have these bits of costume for him to put on. So that's new. And how's this for a touch of modernity? There's a cigarette stub. And then this wonderful still life down here. Oh, he does wonderful still lifes. These onions and this water jug, they look more three-dimensional than, say, his leg and these pants do. This is not a very comfortable pose, is it? What's this foot resting on? Now, this remains a question. Is it because he has troubles with drawing that some of this is true, that he doesn't know yet how to integrate figure and background? Or is he showing you that, no, this is not a man, this is not a singer, this is a painting, this is a flat surface on which I'm putting colors. And this is an unresolvable question. It sort of depends on, as you look at it, what you think. I would say one thing in favor is being, well, it's just part of the conundrum. Look, there's a shadow, so there's a cast light on the figure. But then what's this light around the hand here? Is that the light that hits the wall? Is that something completely separate? Maybe there's a back wall here. With this painting, excited several of the young artists, including the Fantin Latour, who did that one of Monet in his studio. And he came over to see Monet in his studio. And then the next day he brought some of his friends, and several of them were musicians and the rest were painters. They just saw that Monet was opening doors for them into a new way of thinking or a new way of working. And one thing that Fantin Latour reported about that was that Monet was so proud that he did this whole face in just 2 hours. But look how differently it's painted. What's happened to that modeling? This is just black outline. Black outline around each of those fingers. Light casting a shadow does not make a black outline like that. Now, straight on photography might, and it's possible that that's a source, but why on the hands and not on the face? And this one is even more. This is small, and this is in the National Gallery. This is, well, it's about 4 feet long. So it's not a great big painting. 1862, and it's Concert at the Tuileries, which is, they were held, I think, 3 times a week in Paris. It was a great thing for the demi-monde and for those who had any kind of leisure to go and sit and listen to these concerts. And here Monet shows himself looking right out, as a Renaissance artist would look out of his canvas. And here's his brother. Here's that friend Basile. Here's Baudelaire. Many of these people can be identified. So this is an absolutely contemporary event. And in its format, you see, it's also like a dialogue with Courbet, with that burial at Ornans, that low horizontal format. And here for Courbet, these were the peasants of the families in his hometown. So these were all people he knew. Oh, so is this. But now you have in the urban environment. Now, there's one thing I'll mention now and assume that everyone will remember, and I'll try not to keep mentioning it. This blue, when you see this blue and some of these greens is, I don't know how you exactly characterize these greens. They're very cool greens. These are new colors. This is another kind of modernity. Now, this is a modernity that I don't see discussed a lot in the sources, but I'm quite sure this is true, that at the time this would be more noticeable to people because these are those new chemical bright colors. So that matter of the presentation, just the color, not that it's color of nature, these are not natural colors, these are chemical colors, that already introduces a kind of modernity. So it's a modern moment being presented in a modern way. And another part of the modernity of it are the way the men are presented. These are fashion plates. Now, fashion plates are very popular in the French press at this time. It's part of that fact of the growing urbanization where there were people you didn't know. How are you going to classify people? So you have, this is the banker type. This is a stockbroker type. This is a woman of middle class. This is a woman of the demi-monde. This is how a child dresses. This is someone from the country. So there are ways of being able for you to classify people that you didn't know. In the country, you knew everybody. You didn't have to do that. But look at these gents. See that debonair pose, arm, hand behind the back, cigar, monocle, walking stick. Totally poised, totally uninvolved. And that's what he'll present. And there was even a fashion plate that is reminiscent of what he presents in his, the central tree and two girls in front and then some children. So he's looking at modern sources. He's looking at modern painting. He's looking at something from the popular press. And then, well, I'll take you into, I think, this section right in here. Then we'll look at them later. An entirely new way of painting. Simple, self-descriptive title, it just is wet on wet. So he's not working in the systematic way an academy-trained painter would, where you draw, you put in your darks, you let your darks dry, then you build up your lights on your darks, and then you put a glaze over them so that they all go in one with another, and ultimately you get an absolutely impersonal surface. You can't see any brushwork. You just see as if the object represented is there in its entirety, as if it appeared magically. Not this. No, there's a brushstroke, wet paint right over other paint that's still wet. And sometimes it comes through, sometimes it's not finished. And what does that suggest? Well, I'm working hastily. This is the modern tempo of life. And by the way, this is his father here, who was deceased at the time. See, some faces perfectly recognizable. I don't remember who it is, but I know these people are recognized. This one, no. Just patches of color. Look at that. As we look back at it from the point of view of a modern abstract art, this is nowhere near as confounding as it would have been then, because it's like, what is that? That's just color. That's color doesn't just fall out of the sky into a scene. Isn't there supposed to be something there? And people were nonplussed. They didn't know what to make of this. See, Courbet with his peasants. Monet, who always loved a beautiful woman. And this kind of flattening effect when there's so little modeling. Well, you get it for her cheekbones, a little there and here. very slightly there and some around that eye. But this is all flat. Again, as if it were either done hastily or because it's a photography. That is even more true in this portrait of a woman named Victorine, who became his prime model for a while. So he does just no transitions. It just suddenly goes from light to dark. And he's clearly working. Or it looks as if it's done very quickly. When there are X-ray examinations of these, sometimes it's clear that he will have adjusted something over here, maybe a little over there, something, maybe this, he's put the black a little bit over the ear there, so the lobe looks a little different. A little bit. He did make adjustments, but he never hid the fact that, I mean, he makes it look as if this were spontaneous, rushed, and he hides the work. And that is Victorine, who herself once had a painting in the salon, but she became a sort of muse for him for a while. And she was the model for this one of Mademoiselle Victorine as an espada. That was a version of a matador. This and the next two paintings were rejected by the salon. And they were all then, well, I'll tell you the story right now. It's called I look at the time. The Salon of the Refused Paintings. There had been in 1863, well over 5,000 paintings. Let me just see if I can get this information here. Well, I think it was about 5,000 paintings, and the jury rejected about 2/3 of them. And this caused such an uproar that the emperor stepped in and said, okay, we're going to also exhibit the rejected works in an adjacent space so that people could come and see why the works were rejected. And one critic said, before I didn't know what a bad painting was. Now I know what a bad painting is. But the three works by Manet were there. With this one, that's Mademoiselle Victorine as an espada. I'm just going to go. Here, there's this big spatial issue. I mean, is that at the back of the ring? No, looks like it's just touching her back. It just, was that because he intended it? It's certainly taken from something by Goya, and he was perfectly upfront about that should be seen. So maybe he's emphasizing the artificiality. And this is also in the mat, and her shoes are not something a matador would wear. And he had his younger brother pose for this one as a macha, that's the male version there. Again, this is all costume, and this is the stick that models use to hold themselves up when they're being posed. And look at that insouciant pose. He poses like a dandy. So this is clearly not. This is a studio scene. But we have to do this one. I have to do this one. We won't even get through Manet next time otherwise. And the third painting of the three, that there was the two Spanish themed ones on either side in this Salon of the refused works. And this was between them. And this was at the far end of the whole space where these were seen. So this was the second most controversial, most mocked, most vilified painting of any of them there. And he originally called it just the bath. Now we know it as déjeuner sur l'herbe, picnic in the grass. Immensely flummoxing. Famous, and some people say so. Well, not a great painting, but famous. Oh my goodness, did this cause problems? for the public when they looked at this, and for critics, even favorable critics, ones who were, open to the things that Manet was trying. This like just blew their minds. Here's a critic who obviously enjoyed himself commenting on this. We cannot find it an altogether chaste enterprise to set down under trees beside students in cap and gown, a female clad only in leafy shade. Well, it is this combination of a woman in the nude, recognizable as that model Victorine, who was then also seen as an espada right next to it, with these two young men dressed like students. And this one's not so clear who it is, but this is actually his wife Suzanne's brother. So those are recognizable figures. This one, supposedly Manet's brothers posed for it, but it's not a very revealing portrait, and no one knows who this woman is here. So the public, they're dressed as people in the 1860s. Did this happen? Is this an event that occurred? Are we to learn something from this? Well, when you look at it, it should become pretty clear. It not only did it never happen, but it was never an outdoor scene. This is a completely like a studio set. And can't you just see them posed almost independently and then put together in the center of the painting? And there's a marvelous, more three-dimensional than anything else, still life down here. Still life, nude, clothed, landscape. That's like saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. So, as I've said, Manet was never one to fully explain himself. You just have to look at it, and certainly scholars have had a great pleasure looking at it. But this is one where he's doing the impossible. He is modernizing tradition. And I should say that why would I show you this too? Now, this Birth of Venus, there's a later version of this in the Met. This is by an academic artist named Cabanel, very popular teacher. This was the painting in the exhibition, that one that was the approved paintings, not the rejected paintings in that salon of 1863. This was so liked by the emperor that he bought it for his personal collection. So look at that and this. Or even from less than 10 years before, one by Courbet of the ladies at the banks of the Seine. It certainly is a theme about prostitution, which was prostitution was legal in Paris, but all the young women coming into the city, the young men were looking for work, and women were too, and often what work they found was as prostitutes. But so these women sort of just browsing, musing. You see, these are her petticoats. She's taken off her dress and has her shawl over her. But those are clearly prostitutes, but they're by themselves. They're not with men. And for heaven's sakes, they have something on, not sitting on it, and her dress and her hat so clearly over here to the side. So Manet will have had Courbet's painting in mind, and most of all, he had this in mind. This is in the Louvre, and it's a painting by Titian of two, is called a pastoral concert. So you have two musicians and two nude women. Now, the musicians have no interaction with the women. The whole meaning of this painting is not clear, but they perhaps represent music or the symbolic forms of purity. I mean, there's some sort of allegorical meaning to it. But there's the model for, well, if it was possible in earlier art, he'll do it too. And more than that, there was a print after a painting by Raphael, this one, or it's an engraving. It was very well known. I mean, a lot of artists had copies of this. It's a story of the Judgment of Paris, but just this part over here, this is a river god, and this is a little river naiad, little river deity. This pose, even that hand holding a reed, this is a river god, or this hand, he's holding a reed, and especially her looking right out. The oddity now, since he's not holding a reed, but it's, what is that hand? Is he pointing at her? This is such a gesture without understandable origin. Well, the origin is in art. But even this sort of, to me, always disconcerting detail of that black shoe against that bare foot, the way they touch, oh, that's. He's maintaining this very much. So he's knowledgeable about art of the past, and he's bringing it together in this extraordinary work. And then where's that careful modeling and modulation in tones? Oh, this is almost flat, very dusty white almost. Look at the shadow over here. It's just lost in shade there. Or, oh my goodness, that's just art. How about that way she looks at you? That's not art, that's life. That's the woman, frankly appraising you. Totally at ease with your looking at her. And all the separate brushstrokes quite easily seen. So you see the construction of the painting. It kind of just disappears in black. Compare that to Bouguereau. Not only in the technique, but look at that. She's looking at you, but from her face is turned down slightly, so it's a somewhat shy demeanor. She's your equal. Then I just have this for the details now. Here, if any place, you're going to see how he just filled in the background around this. This is no outdoor scene. It's just very clear. He just put this patch of green around there. That's this new color. Or the woman who seems to be bathing, well, she's bathing at his shoulder. Hardly a lake farther back here. It's a nicer section. So we're looking at something entirely new, or the wonderful, wonderful still life with artificiality, because these are cherries, looks like being cherries, and these are figs. They don't ripen in the same season. There's a flask. This is the only painting that was more controversial. That was Whistler's Lady in White. And Whistler had also studied in Paris. So we will be looking, especially as we're moving into the Impressionist artists, there's a lot of moving back and forth between London and Paris. I don't know about you. When I look at that, it's like, that's controversial. I can see why the Monet is. This one I find harder. We can at least start then. A painting that he was working on in his same years, 1862, 63, but he didn't exhibit it until 1865, and that's this Olympia. Now, you can see from this, which is a better color one, that there's that overall cooler tonality. That this is just an old image reproduction that makes it turn yellow like this, but evidently the whole painting itself has darkened with age. Oh, this upset people even more. Oh my goodness. Again, he's using the same model, Victorine. And there's a story that's manifest for you here, because her servant is bringing this marvelous bouquet of flowers. So this is obviously a prostitute whose client is introducing himself by bringing in flowers. And we are where the client is, because here's this little cat arched its back, tail up in the air, reacting to our presence as she just looks out at us. Next. But from art, it's Titian. But that languorous pose, the sideways turn to the head. She too emphasizes her sexuality, but her hand just lies there. And she has a nice curled up dog. Servants, flowers, long red hair. The other model was Goya. That's where you got this like other sort of artistic permission to show that kind of frank, inviting sexuality. This is her hair. You see, it's not so clear anymore, but she has this long red hair coming down her shoulders here. An absolutely awful paw of a hand here. Underarm hair. Supposedly this is quite true to what Victorine's body was like. She had sort of short legs. I'll see that. But again, it's just shadows just pushed to the edges. Grays, whites. Oh, look at them. What fun this must have been in painting it, to come up with this closely related range of colors, distinguishing them from one another. Now there's a beautiful hand. She kicked off one of her mules. Monet loved cats. He does lots of prints of cats and paintings that have cats in them. As opposed to Titian's dog. And those long, beautiful, tapering extremities. And here the public reacted. even by Daumier, in front of this painting. See, like, why is this woman called Olympia? Well, Olympia was a common name for a prostitute, as well as being a sort of classical association. My friend, perhaps it's the cat that's named that, the black cat's named Olympia. So there's a consternation of the public as they look at that. I think we're going to have an awful lot of. I do not intend to have a 6-week class on Monet. I'd like to, but I won't. With this, we will stop just to change the mood in a sense, but it's, I think, to modern sensibilities, perhaps even more shocking. Then with that, he also showed, or the year after, he showed Dead Christ. He's done the same thing to religious art. He's removed all the religion and returned it to reality, which people were not ready for. This looked like the corpse of a working man. Those angels look like boys in costume. Look at the filth of those hands and that face. Compared to Bouguereau of that same time. And since you know what I think of this artist, to me, those faces right there, that's a complete Easter image. Well, it's a complete 4 o'clock image. So I see there are some for chat. I will stop. I'll certainly take any questions, any comments. Is there anyone want me to leave something on or to go back to any image?
I have a question about the Titian.
About which one?
The Titian?
Yeah.
The second picture.
Want me to go back to it?
Yeah.
Oop.
Okay. Yeah, oh, no, you were past it.
That one?
Now, what is the girl in white in the background doing?
She has a chest there, in which they would keep all their clothing. So it's supposedly, this is like a marriage chest. So she's getting a garment out, probably.
Okay. I just found it disconcerting.
What?
It's disconcerting.
Yeah, because it looks here, you can't even see
over
ahead.
the toilet or something. Like vomiting. I mean, it just weird. It stuck out. You've been
watching The Crown. It's a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else want to look at anything?
Yes, the painting where they're at a concert and you said the blues and the greens were introduced.
Well, yeah. But see, even here, this is good color. This is this new color. Oh, and he loves blacks. You want the whole painting?
That
there.
One, this one. The children look so tiny and strange.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, no, there are all sorts of, and look at all this kind of blur here. You can't even figure out what this is all about. And this is perfectly beautifully done here. This is to be understood as, you know what? You take this as a challenge. Start looking at things around you and see how much we don't notice. And this is a little bit like not noticing kids. But I was thinking of an odd one this morning. This is an issue, especially in 19th and 20th century. It'll be more even in 20th. Look at a standing person when you stand close to them. Look at their head and then look at their feet and see how tiny their feet are. Our minds edit what we see, overriding what our eyes are telling us. And sometimes what an artist is doing is, and Monet will be doing this with color. Saying, this is what you are, this is what is real. You're not noticing what is real. But here, I don't know why. I don't know how you can explain this. And one of these is even thought to be his son. So I don't know. Yeah, it's very disconcerting. More. Anybody else need to look at anything? All right, well, let's see if we get to what there's in the chat. Good video of Monet at the Met. Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, it does look like you stomp out that cigarette. Have no idea. Yes, I think it's supposed to be that his foot is pressed against it. So even that is like, it's not resting on it, but pressed against it, which is sort of a strange, his foot, the Spanish singer with his foot pressed against that bar of the bench on which he's seated.
Maggie, can you go back to the garden party?
This one in its full, or you want to go to the? Is this the one you mean? For a garden party? Are you there?
The two gentlemen and the nude.
Okay, it's now called the Luncheon in the Grass. Yeah, quite a party. Yes.
There's a three-dimensional recreation of this picture in the grounds for sculpture.
Do they include even this part, this woman? So you can walk around it?
I cannot remember whether she's included.
Well, we'll need to go. I'll need to go look at that too. Yeah. You know, here's a clue to this being, well, I don't know, maybe this is supposed to be casting, but that's shadow cast here, right? I don't think he's trying to fool anybody into thinking that's actually outdoors. But the public accustomed to looking at something as a literal representation is going to think, oh, this is a literal representation.
You know, you said that a lot of these pieces are from other areas. Is this like practice or, you know, using different techniques?
See, can you expand on that a little? I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean. Areas like areas of the painting, or
right? You said that these came from, you know, you cited different perspectives, like the hands, and you know how they seem to be from different places but not put together properly. So I was wondering if this was like just practicing using, you know, drawing the hand or drawing the perspective or drawing the background.
My goodness, we don't know. We simply don't know. It's hard to think that this is because Monet is inept. Extremely hard to think that it's because he's inept. And it's also just difficult to think that is he just trying to show that this is artifice. It's an unresolvable issue.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah. Someone pointed out, I don't know what I was reading, that in almost every single work, you know, you have to be careful making too dogmatic, that you'll find something that's very strange. I'm going to go, we are so beyond what we should do, but I'm just going to speed through 1,000 here. Beyond what I even thought we would get through. To show you one that just looked, oh, come on. Look at this hand. This is late in his career. Look at that hand. Look at this hand. It's almost, you have the sense he's almost like playing. Although here, if you think of this as like, I have something that's of visual interest right at the center of the picture, around which the rest of the picture is built. So you can think of it in that kind of abstract, purely artistic way. It's just, well, good artists should leave you with, I think, lots to consider, to think on indefinitely. Should I stop now? Yes, I should. We will get to Magritte too. So we'll leave her watching you until next week.
In the picnic on the grass, do I just have a particularly wicked mind?
You probably do, but what about?
Yeah. When you see the distance shot of it, I mean, does that look like his gray pants are supposed to be suggesting like a something of a phallic nature from a distance? Do you see that, or am I just? That's the first thing I thought about.
Which part is phallic?
The gentleman with the cap on, and he has the gray pants on, where the
this one,
and where his cane meets his
crotch.
torso. The first thing I thought when I saw it, it was like a representation of, or a cheeky representation of an individual being aroused, which was strange because he's.
Well, no, you know, there's.
I thought it was maybe him just being cute or something like that.
I don't think he would be. But, I don't know.
Because remember, in the one he's taking from there, the guy's sitting there naked and has, you know, the phallus showing and such. So I wonder if that was his way of just being cute and showing it in terms of the fabric, and then saying, "Oh no, that's not what I intended" and such. But I think that's what he.
No idea. I have no idea.
Because when you see what he took it from the source material that he was trying to copy, I thought he was trying to present that and then say, "Well, of course not. That's not what I intended. It's just the fold of his trousers."
I don't know. I know that well, this will be for a couple of weeks. We're going to see a lot of women, because one of the big social modern life issues that I'm talking about, this prostitution in Paris. We're going to see a lot about women and their availability and the way they're being used, and as just a fact of modern life. So sexuality is a big thing in these paintings. It's not like, ooh, ooh. And it's not just pretending it's like a Venus in the past. So I don't know. I probably will never look at that quite the same way again.
Sorry for that. But especially, that's what I thought. And I thought, well, am I going a bit batty or what? But then when you showed where he basically copied that from, it's like the geography is pretty close there.
Right. And paintings, one of the worth of paintings that they let your mind go wherever your mind goes.
Oh my God.
They're rich. They're rich.
Then I'm in trouble.
Yeah, you are. Okay.
But her, as you said, her look though, her glance is amazing. Just that, as you said, that appraising glance. It's like, hey, I'm here, relaxed, gentleman. What's the big deal?
And I mean, this would have been like, it was perfectly acceptable for men to have a mistress and then have a family. I mean, that was just part of life. Manet himself dies of syphilis, so he knew about all this stuff.
So he practiced what he painted.
Well, Val did. So, but the blatant giving the woman the respect of treating her like she's not an object, but she's a partner in this, is like really new. Okay.
I'm curious which artists you're going to be covering in this. I just came to this late myself, and is it just going to be Manet, or are you going to be going?
No, it's not supposed to be. I do want to get through most of the Impressionists in this series, and then there are still many artists not in the Impressionist circle that in the next series, you know, Cézanne, who actually showed with Impressionists. We have a lot of art in Paris to go, but there will be Monet, Renoir, Pissarro, Sisley, and Basile.
I would love to hear your impressions of Lautrec as well. But
Yes,
he's probably a different.
That's it's pie in the sky for me to get that far. Although he studied, you know, his brother was an art dealer in Paris, and he studied art in Paris. It was too frantic for him, and he left there. But yeah, he belongs in this too. Okay. More?
Thank you.
More?